The truth about family in heaven. Will we know each other? Imagine this. You're standing at the funeral of a loved one, maybe a parent, a sibling, a spouse, or even a child. You hear people say things like, "They're in a better place now," or "One day we'll all be together again." But deep down, a question lingers in your heart. Is that really true? Will we really see our loved ones again in heaven? Will we recognize them? Will they remember us? These are some of the most personal and emotional questions we can ask. And let's be honest, it's not just curiosity. It's personal. We miss them. We long for them. The thought of never seeing them again feels unbearable. But here's the good news. The Bible doesn't leave us in the dark about this. God, in His love and wisdom, has given us real answers about what happens after death, about heaven, and about the relationships we'll have there. Now, I know there are a lot of different opinions out there. Movies, books, even personal stories of near-death experiences. Some say we become angels. Others say we won't remember anything from Earth. And some even suggest that we'll just dissolve into some kind of cosmic energy. But today, we're not here for speculation. We're here for truth. We're going straight to the Bible, the only source we can fully trust. And what we're going to discover might surprise you. Now, before we get into this, let me prepare you. Some of what the Bible says about heaven and our relationships there might challenge what you've always believed. It might even feel uncomfortable at first. But if we truly believe in God, then we have to trust that His plan for eternity is far greater than anything we could ever imagine. Are you willing to let go of assumptions and hear what God actually says? If so, you're in the right place. In this video, we're going to walk through what happens to us after we die, whether we'll recognize and remember our loved ones in heaven, what relationships will be like in eternity, the hard question, what about family members who aren't saved, how this truth should change the way we live today. So if you've ever lost someone you love, or if you just want to know what your future holds, stick with me. By the end of this, you won't have to guess anymore, because God has already given us the answers. Let's dive in. Section 1. What happens to us after death? Death is one of the few things in life that is absolutely certain, yet it remains one of the most mysterious. Every single one of us will face it, and yet most people avoid thinking about it until it's too late. But as Christians, we don't have to fear death, and we don't have to guess what happens afterward, because the Bible gives us clear answers. So what really happens when we take our last breath on earth? Do we just sleep until the end of time? Do we immediately go to heaven or hell? And what does all of this mean for our relationships with loved ones? Understanding the afterlife. The Bible teaches that humans are more than just physical bodies. We have an eternal soul. When we die, our body returns to dust, but our soul continues to exist. Ecclesiastes 12:7 puts it this way: "Then the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it." This means that death is not the end. It's a transition. Our physical body is temporary, but our soul is eternal. And that raises an important question. Where do we go immediately after death? The separation of the righteous and the unrighteous. Jesus gave us a glimpse into this reality in Luke 16:19-31, where He tells the story of the rich man and Lazarus. In this story, both men die. One goes to a place of suffering, the other to a place of peace. The rich man, in torment, is fully aware of his past life and even remembers his family still on earth. This tells us something crucial. 1. We remain conscious after death. 2. We have memory and awareness of life on earth. 3. There is an immediate separation between the saved and the lost. For believers, the Bible gives us a beautiful promise. In 2 Corinthians 5:8, Paul says, "To be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord." This means that the moment a believer dies, they are instantly in the presence of Jesus. No waiting, no wandering, no soul sleep. If your loved one knew Christ, then the very second they took their last breath here, they took their first breath in heaven. For those who rejected Christ, however, their soul is separated from God, awaiting final judgment. Revelation 20:12-15 describes this terrifying moment, where those whose names are not found in the book of life are cast into the lake of fire. This is why salvation is so urgent, because eternity is real, and there are only two destinations. But what about the final resurrection? The Bible teaches that one day when Jesus returns, our physical bodies will be resurrected and transformed into glorified, eternal bodies. 1 Corinthians 15:52-53. At that moment, body and soul will be reunited, and we will live forever in the new heaven and new earth. So, when we die, we are immediately in either heaven or hell. But the story doesn't end there. The ultimate fulfillment of God's plan is still to come. And this brings us to a big question. Will we recognize and remember our loved ones in heaven? Section 2. Will we recognize our loved ones in heaven? This is one of the most asked questions about heaven. If we make it there, will we still remember our parents, siblings, children, and spouses? Will we recognize their faces? Will we feel the same love for them that we did on earth? The Bible doesn't give us a single direct verse that says, yes, you will recognize your loved ones in heaven. However, when we look at multiple passages, the answer becomes very clear. We absolutely will. Biblical evidence of recognition in heaven. One of the clearest examples comes from the Transfiguration in Matthew 17:1-4. Jesus takes Peter, James, and John up a mountain, and suddenly, Moses and Elijah appear. What's fascinating is that these two men had been dead for centuries, yet they were not only recognizable, but the disciples somehow knew who they were, without introductions. This tells us something crucial. Our identity continues in the afterlife. Moses was still Moses. Elijah was still Elijah. They didn't become nameless spirits or lose their individuality. Another example is found in Luke 16:19-31, the story of the rich man and Lazarus. In this account, the rich man, after death, remembers his family, recognizes Abraham, and recalls his earthly life. If people lost all memory of their past and their loved ones, this story wouldn't make sense. And perhaps the greatest evidence comes from Jesus himself after his resurrection. When Jesus rose from the dead, his disciples recognized him. Mary knew his voice, John 20:16. Thomas touched his wounds, John 20:27. The disciples on the road to Emmaus finally recognized him when he broke bread, Luke 24:30-31. What does this tell us? Our resurrection bodies will be different, but we will still be ourselves. Jesus wasn't a ghost. He wasn't a completely new person. He was still Jesus, only glorified. And if Jesus retained his identity after his resurrection, then so will we.